Split Tube Media and the Synesthesia Podcast present a special daily October podcast. Help to the king.
Jason, have you read Stephen King's books? Have you read Stephen King's books? King movie, a Stephen King movie. King movie, a Stephen King movie. King movie, a Stephen King movie.
I have done my best to scare the shit out of you guys.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Do you want to record a podcast?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Hey, Jim.
We'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, Jason?
Hey, Jim.
Yeah. What is it, Jason?
You have to.
No. Jason, it is, if you round up, it's halfway through the month.
If you round out...
I've been rounding out for the last 10 years or so.
Same here. We made it into the 90s, though.
The 1990s.
Fully in the 1990s.
We're watching Blossom. Was that in the 90s or was that in the 80s? I don't know.
Here we are. We're back.
I'm not. I left.
What are we gonna... What are our mouths gonna do in a week from now? And then 2 weeks from now?
Well, in 2 weeks, my mouth is going to be stuffed with candy corn.
Oh, that's true. Probably Dreamcatcher or Secret Window will be unintelligible because we're just going to be talking with mouths full of candy.
Yeah. I'm going to have inch-long candy bars stuck on all my teeth.
Welcome back to Hell to the King, the podcast where we just keep watching Stephen King movies.
Jason, can I tell you something?
Because nobody made us. We just did it to ourselves.
I know this is going to sound apocryphal at the beginning, but I went to someone's birthday party, and I was talking to someone I hadn't seen in a while, and they asked what I was up to. And I said, I'm doing this podcast. I was just telling them about it in general. I didn't even go into the Stephen King situation. I just told them that I was doing this podcast with you where we talk about movies. And they told me, Jason, that there are other podcasts about movies. Did you know that?
I don't believe it.
Yeah. I got mad. I haven't looked yet, but I'm going to look later and see if there are other podcasts where people talk about movies. Because if there are, I'm pretty mad.
I'll say this. Don't look too hard.
Okay.
And if you see a podcast with my name on it as a guest, ignore it. It's not real.
I'm going to sue you.
It was before we started. I just needed to be heard.
That's good. I'm glad. It's good to have an outlet.
It's day 14. It's the end of week 2. And we have watched a movie I've actually been it was one of the ones I was pretty excited about doing.
Why is
this
that?
project for.
Why? Why?
This movie looms large.
Explain yourself.
This movie looms pretty large in my, or loomed pretty large in my childhood.
Yes. Yeah.
As a thing that, and as a result, has loomed pretty large in my psyche ever since.
That's fair.
Without me ever really seeing it.
It was a big cultural moment for sure.
It was. We are talking about the TV movie adaptation of
And
It.
Only, right? It's the only movie adaptation of It, is this one.
Yeah. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where to go with that bit. It's interesting to me. First of all, I didn't plan it like this. Mm-hmm. This is just how it shook out, lining the movies up more or less chronologically. Mm-hmm. But we're more or less smack in the center of the month.
Yeah. I mean, mathematically, yes.
Yeah. And I always, for some reason, my brain always works when I'm thinking about these kinds of things.
I disagree.
Let me rephrase. When I'm thinking about things like series of movies or eras of movies or interconnections of movies like this, for some reason my mind tends towards a visual model of like concentric circles with an epicenter.
Okay.
Like when I think about American film history, mm-hmm. I tend to think about film as a 20th century event.
Sure.
So like the things that happened in the 19th century and the things that are continuing to happen in the 21st century are in some ways kind of vestigial attachments to the core of what film has been.
Okay.
Like the 19th century was film developing into what it would be.
Sure.
And now we're in the 21st century and film is disappearing and turning into video and turning into all of these other visual media.
Yeah.
And so the 20th century is where film lives.
Yeah.
And then the more you go towards the center of the 20th century, the more you get to what it feels like to me is the heart of American cinema.
What one film is in your direct bull point?
It's two films.
Spot?
It's two films, and it's the year 1959.
Okay.
So, and it's two, like, yin and yang, Apollo and Dionysus, like very Nietzschean setup, and it's Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo.
Okay.
And John Cassavetes' Shadows.
Okay.
Both are in 1959, and they represent polar opposite expressive universes,
sure.
Like strategies for not just storytelling, but like creating artistic experiences, period. And I feel like you can, not precisely, because I don't actually want things to be schematic, but I feel like you can feel the resonances both towards the past and towards the future out of that year and kind of organize things that way. Not talking about like literal cause and effect. I'm not saying like the things that happened in 1959 affected 1931, sure. Although Catch Me on a Different Day, and maybe I'll make some kind of argument like that.
I believe that they do, but sure.
But for some reason, whatever reason, my mind tends to organize things in terms of epicenters and then ripples outward.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, some of the reasons I know, some of them maybe I don't, both the book and the initial TV adaptation feel like an epicenter of what Stephen King has been and means in so far as I can see the shape of him and his work. I don't know if that tracks for you, but that's sort of where I'm coming at this from.
Well, I don't see things with an epicenter. So...
I mean, that's a thing.
I can imagine this being that, but I also don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen the second half yet. Having seen the things before this, that sort of I can see there being developments that are cresting here, but they could crest 2 movies later. I don't actually know yet. You know.
Right. And this is not a precise thing, but I also mean more like. Well, I said that this movie and this book and this whole concept loomed huge over. I mean, certainly every kid I knew what this was.
Yes.
Right? Like, this was a thing that we were very aware of.
Agreed.
When we were growing up. And it just feels like... I don't know. It feels like this is the idea and this is the movie that for... It feels like this is the like calling card idea for Stephen King. Like if you're talking about Stephen King, this is the one that everybody knows. Everybody knows the monster clown. Everybody knows something about it.
I think that's true. That seems accurate to me.
So it feels like somehow, and so what? And
it's certainly a seminal text of the King oeuvre.
Well, and it also ties in. So on a literal textual level, the novel is deeply intertwined with what's become King's like macro project.
Okay.
In the Dark Tower books.
Okay.
Which is, he's created a whole, like, metatextual fantasy universe called the Macroverse, I guess.
Okay.
That all of his books take place in on one level or another.
Okay.
And so all of his books take place on, like, one level of reality, but then at a higher, more, like I said, metatextual or macroversal reality, there are these, like, wandering archetypes and god figures and energies and beings that can essentially like travel between the worlds that the books represent.
Okay.
Whether they do literally or not, I don't know. This is half based on actual King stuff that I've looked at, and then half based on me, like, late night internet researching what the hell all of this is, because I'm not reading every single book.
Of course.
But it gets very intricate, and Pennywise, the monster in it, is, I think, one of the first representatives of that macroverse to show up explicitly in the books.
Okay.
It doesn't really come across in this movie, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
But in the book, it is a being from a complete other plane of existence that is, like, older than our universe and is tied in with the, like, theology at the center of the King universe or King Macroverse.
This is all.
Like, it's one of the significant entities in all of King fiction.
This is a sort of sidestep, but I love In the Mouth of Madness, and the main character in it is Sutter Kane, which is obviously just Stephen King, but, like, bopped with a shoulder. But I always,
John Carpenter movie.
Yeah, the John Carpenter movie In the Mouth of Madness. But I always read it as a story about, like, a Lovecraftian horror author, because I didn't know anything about Stephen King. But that makes a lot of sense, because it sounds like he has a Lovecraftian sort of universe happening beyond his.
He does.
Which makes sense. There's a lot of that sort of. Yeah. All of these have had these sort of. Not all of them. A lot of them have this sort of. There's something spooky. You'll never understand it. Or there's. I mean, even a couple of days ago when we did Pet Sematary, it's the thing that's coming back through all the dead things is some kind of thing. Yeah, some kind of evil thing
something
that's
connected
beyond.
To some other thing. Well, and it's in the books even more so. Like we talked about in Cujo, they had that whole segment cut out of the ghost that would pop out of the kid's closet and make fun of him.
Yeah,
that isn't. I'm pretty sure. Again, I never went and looked this up, but I'm pretty sure that character was like a dead character from another King story. Of course. And so, like, there's all of these interconnections, but the interconnections are happening not just on a literal, like, this character met this character.
Right.
It's more like the spirits of different stories haunt the other stories, which is actually more interesting to me. Like, that's a more charming thing to have happen.
Yeah, that's really lovely.
And I agree, The Carpenter in the Mouth of Madness is a great movie, and it is very much about a Lovecraft figure. Yeah. But it's also, it's basically positing, like, what if Stephen King was as deranged as Lovecraft.
Right.
But King does have that aspect to him.
Yeah. I mean,
King's is all a little bit more mapped out, I think.
Sure.
But it also gets really weird.
But if Lovecraft had written 8,000 books, his would be mapped out too. He just wrote 25 stories and died.
Yeah. Well, and also and
good riddance. He was a racist.
H.P. Lovecraft. Cancelled. Well, I do think, not that I want to get in this, we can save this for our Lovecraft podcast, where we love craft.
I always love craft.
No,
never mind. I was going to keep pushing that, but I don't need to.
I think Lovecraft was actually
a racist?
Interested in, well, he was very much a racist, but he was interested in his fiction in the undefinability and unmappability.
Right.
Whereas I think
because for him, if you defined it, it wasn't scary anymore, right?
Yeah, well, and if you defined it, you had to admit that you were just talking about, like, Italians.
Right. Right.
But he was also, like, that was, it's almost like in Lovecraft, it's almost like a proto-modernist gesture, like the way he describes things. He describes what they aren't. And he's describing a thing and he says like 3 or 4 different things. It's like, it looked like an octopus, but not like this part, but it looked like a man, and it wasn't a man. And you're like, I've read this long description of this thing, and all I know is that there's these 4 things that doesn't look
definitely
like.
Not an actual octopus. Yeah.
You can't actually form it in your brain.
Right.
And I think that was actually part of Lovecraft's art.
Sure.
Was that proto-modernist gesture of complete deferral of understanding.
Yeah.
Whereas I think King makes gestures like that because he finds them charming or creepy, but at his core, he is this little kid that shows up in all of these movies that has all of the action figures and maps it out and figures out
for sure.
the plan and, the rules and how does this fantasy world work, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, he gets to be the Lovecraft and the nerdy kid who's inventing his own universe that fits the Lovecraft books and also goes beyond it, right? He gets to make his own map, his own like fan canon, right? He gets to just build that, but it's also the real canon because he's both.
Yeah, exactly. And it deals with some of that stuff directly, even in the adaptation. Like, they had to cut out so much of the books. The book's like over 1,000 pages long.
Sure.
But they cut it down to essentially a 3-hour movie.
Right.
Once, you remove commercials, 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah.
But even in the TV adaptation, there is a sense that this thing they're facing is not what it seems.
Yes.
It's not even what it is. Like, the physical thing that it is not entirely it.
That didn't come across to me in the film.
Well, so there's like a couple of lines of dialogue where they pay homage to the idea, but then in the actual climax to the film, I agree, it completely they completely abandoned that.
It feels like the kids come up with some theories, and some of the theories that they come up with are super interesting.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they're like, nah, it's just a big weird spider crab that we can push over with our hands.
Yeah, the ending is definitely the worst.
It's so dismal.
I like the crab. I like there's things I like about it, but
different movie.
It's such a deflating.
Yeah.
And, well, I'm going to hold off for right now talking about the ending that's
People
in the book.
People who listen to this whole series, Jason, are going to be like, for the first 6 or 7 days, our whole series, they're going to be like, for the first 6 or 7 days, they talk about the plots of the movies, but then by a week and a half in, they just spiral off into these weird, abstract meta theories about Stephen King. They don't even talk about the movies anymore. They're all labeled.
Goddammit,
There's like, this one's them talking about it, but they just talk about, like, Stephen King's mouth and how the shape it is, and
but that's what
his
it
personal
demands.
Thoughts.
Here's the thing. Like I said, it's bigger than just being the book. It's bigger than being the TV adaptation or the new movie adaptations or the whatever it is. It's by design. He wrote a book that's over 1,000 pages that is also a gateway into tens of thousands of pages of other books. So, like, I don't think you can adequately talk about just one aspect of it without bleeding into all of this other stuff.
I can.
And that, to me, is what's most interesting and weird and resonant about it that only occasionally comes across in this TV movie. Well, but I do agree we should talk about the movie.
I think we watched the movie that through different lenses, right? Because I didn't know any of that until you just said it.
Right.
And there's no hint in this movie that any of that exists. When I watch this film, I just get this one movie. I don't get any indication that there's anything beyond it in any way that any of these other Stephen King movies haven't given me.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you was what it felt to you like the monster was, because I had all of this sort of free-floating understanding. So
sure.
The movie, it's like I said, it's a TV miniseries. I think it was only showed over 2 nights, though.
Yeah.
It was originally supposed to be like an 8-night thing.
Oh, really?
And they were supposed to do a really long adaptation of it,
Whoa.
and then ABC got cold feet. Because it was the first miniseries in Salem's Lot, first King.
Right.
The first TV thing. And ABC was trying to do this big thing, and like they're going to like really do it.
Yeah.
And then they kept cutting the number of nights while they were in production. They were like, actually, we're only going to do 4. Actually, we're only going to do 3. Actually, finally, it's just 2. Like, I think they were nervous about it, like, being a horror project and being on primetime and giving up all of that real estate to something. So the screenwriter, who is not Larry Cohen again.
Oh, yeah. Old Lawrence fake Larry Cohen.
Who wrote Carrie, had to keep rewriting to fit the new time parameters. That's
interesting that it was originally longer, Jason, because it already, the second half, nothing happens.
Okay, so actually, the first question I was going to ask is, am I just beaten down at this point in the month, or was this movie kind of good?
I thought the first half of this movie was absolutely delightful.
Okay.
And then I thought the second half was just treading water and then a super disappointing ending. Which was a huge bummer for me because the cast is so strong, you know? Like I love Harry Anderson. I love John Ritter. Everyone else was fine. It's a really strong cast, and they were just given absolutely nothing to do. It's 45 minutes of them calling each other and then showing up and eating dinner and then being in a library, and then they fight a monster, but it's a giant crab, and they just push it over with their hands. That's the second half of this movie, and it's terrible.
Yeah,
I think a lot about the Gene Siskel definition of a good movie, which is if you would rather sit and have dinner with the characters than watch them do the things they do in the movie, then it's bad. And in this scenario, I think they were all irritating human beings for the most part, but they were still more interesting than this movie lets them be.
Yes, I think that's true. I did get really excited about the cast.
Yeah, the cast is super
especially
good.
Because I feel like
because of how much you love Seth Green.
Well, I was surprised to see him there, and then I was like, "Is that?"
I was also surprised that he has changed 0% between 1990 and now. Yeah,
so much so that I didn't actually believe that it could be him.
Yeah, you were like,
"There's no way he would look like that."
He would have been. Yeah, exactly.
But usually, when you have a movie like this, where you see characters as kids and then characters as adults,
yes.
Usually one half of that casting situation is a disappointment.
Agreed.
And in this one, it wasn't. I love the kids.
Solid
and
across.
The cast as adults was awesome.
Agreed.
I agree they didn't give them enough to do, but
they were very well cast.
Yeah, I thought the kids were really great. And then Annette O'Toole, John Ritter, Harry Anderson, Richard Thomas. I've never loved Richard Thomas. That's the one.
He is the least
Dennis Christopher's great.
Out of anybody. And it's interesting because he's sort of the main character, right? But really, I don't know who the actor's name is. The librarian, the black guy, is by far should be the main character. He's the one who has all of the main character beats in the second half. But they're like, no, instead Richard Thomas is going to be
Tim Reed.
Who is great. I really liked.
He's really
recognize him, but I really liked him.
I recognized him from something. Like he felt like the kind of guy who was in. He's just like in a lot.
Yeah,
like it's like I saw you in the 90s a bunch
for sure,
and I just don't remember exactly where.
Yeah, well, he's very good in this movie, and for some reason isn't the main character, which is weird. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's part of the. So I will easily place almost all of the flaws with the movie at the fact that they had to condense it down into this time section. Not to say they could have done it better. Couldn't have done it better. I think they could have done it a lot better even in the time that they had. Yes. But just sort of looking at it, I kind of understand working at the speed that I think he probably had to work at.
Sure. It ending up clumsy after several reductions.
After having to keep reducing it of like, okay, well, what do I get to keep from the book? What do I have to jettison? Where can I put it so that it works without the other parts?
I wonder how much it was. I wonder if it was originally they were like, we're going to do 3 nights with these kids, and that whole part just stayed intact. And then they were like, and then we have 10 nights of these adults. And they were like, just kidding, make it 1. And he was like, and that's why.
Well, you would think more things would happen then, though.
But the first half is so much stronger. You know? Well, the first half feels like it settled in a nice way.
Here's the other thing about the book versus the adaptations. And for some reason, this is... I guess we could probably imagine why they do this. But for some reason, both adaptations, this one and the new one, have chosen to separate out the child and adult storylines. In the book, they are overlapped through to the end.
Oh, that
they
makes
go back and forth.
Sense.
So, like, you get the climaxes both towards the like it's
sure. It's the shape of one thing.
Yeah. And it's not like exactly that, but you get a lot more kid toward the end, and you get a lot more adult at the beginning. Yeah. So it's intermeshed together, as opposed to just because most of the interesting stuff happens when they're kids.
Yes.
And that's kind of the point of the book. It's a book about moving from childhood to adulthood.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And so there's not as much to do when you're an adult except deal with all of the things that are left over from being a kid.
Right.
Which are then like intermixed structurally.
Yeah. That sounds nice.
Yeah. But for some reason they don't. Like, there doesn't seem to be any reason.
I can see making explicitly a 2-night version of a thing that's broken into 2 discrete halves that are intermixed and being like, I'm going to unmix those 2 discrete halves because I have 2 chunks to work with. I can understand that impulse.
Yeah.
But in the new movie, I don't understand why
I suppose that way because you get I guess because in the new movie they broke it into 2 parts, so you get a climax for each part.
But like break it into 3 parts and keep them intermingled. Then you have one more movie and whatever, who cares?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of other choices they could make on that front. But I do think that's a big part of what we're feeling. Also, there is a lot just like left out of the scenes as they're constructed.
I would imagine.
Getting back to the movie as it is, as it exists, trying to set the book aside, which I will do for the moment.
Yes.
What did this movie feel like to you? Like, what did it feel like the monster was? What were the high points and the low points for you?
I can tell you the highest point, Jason, is when the lead bully is attacked by a blinding ray of light and turns into Jim Jarmusch. That's the best part of the whole movie for me. I assume that this film is made as a prequel to Jim Jarmusch's entire career. Here's the thing, Jason, is that Pennywise, the clown, the monster, is awful. It's a terrible antagonist.
Okay.
Because why is he a clown? It seems like because they're kids, but then he just keeps being a clown, but he's not a clown. It's just a face he chose. It doesn't make any sense. Sometimes he can be beams of light, and then he's actually a giant, terrible, slow-moving crab monster. I hate him. I hate the monster. I don't understand any of it. Because he can show up as other things. But he's not
he can look like anything.
But can he? Or can he just look like a clown, a beam of light, and a crab? Because that's all he does. I think maybe once he's a skeleton. No,
he's a skeleton. He's a werewolf. He's that old lady.
Oh, yeah, he's an old lady.
Everybody's dead relatives.
Why doesn't he show up as things, then? Why does he choose to do things other than a clown 4 times? Why is he a clown so much?
Because...
What's his deal? It seems like it's a way to trick them into appreciating him, but it's not. It is the first time. The first time he shows up, he's like, "Hey, little kid, I'm just a normal clown who's stuck in the sewer like a clown. Why don't you give me your arm?" And the kid's like, "Okay." And that one time, it makes sense that he's a clown. Then for the rest of the movie, it makes 0 sense that he shows up as a clown.
And he doesn't even... Wait, in your
Not
version...
only that, Jason, but he shows up as a clown in a photograph from the 1800s. He's been pulling this same gimmick for hundreds of years.
I mean, I could see he just... Did your version have a scene with the sewer?
The kid goes up to the sewer. Or do they just
talk about it?
And the kid goes up to the sewer and he has a boat that the older brother made for him. It skips around the arm being ripped off. They say later that his arm was ripped off. But I saw the kid go up to the clown in the sewer and reach in, and then I think it cuts out.
I think my version didn't have that.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Weird. I wonder what... Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention?
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I saw the kid go out... But it didn't... No, anyway.
The little brother kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I saw him go up.
I never saw...
He has a sort of conversation with Tim Curry.
That seemed conspicuous to me that scene was gone, because that's like the... iconic scene from the story.
Sure.
And I was like, well, I guess they just couldn't deal with
off.
having his arm ripped off.
They don't rip an arm off. Or in the one I saw, they didn't rip the arm off. But he did go out and talk to Tim Curry and then disappear.
Oh, yeah. That was not in the version I watched.
Librarian? Then does it cut? Oh, then it cuts to the future and there's another dead kid, right? And then
the version I watched just starts with the little girl.
Oh, weird.
Am I missing a big piece of it?
The beginning. I don't know how big it was. Honestly, the movie's 3 hours long. I don't remember this.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Looking at it real quick.
The thing that was my favorite, I'm just going to talk while you're looking. The thing that was my favorite in this movie that they allude to when the kids fight the monster, and then they almost come back to when they're adults, but they don't really. But it seems like because this monster is just sort of an ambiguous being of pure decision making, right? It's like, I'm a clown now, whatever, I am. When the kids fight it, they're like, okay, these things are silver, so they'll hurt it. And because they think that, they do, right? Yeah. And that one kid's like, okay, the stuff that's in my inhaler is acid for you. Acid. Yeah. And then he sprays it and it hurts him because they just said it will. And that, I think, is awesome. That's such a good attribute for a monster. And then they just never go back to any of that. They just drop it. Yeah. And for me, that was the most interesting part. So
like those are all hints at the sort of greater tapestry of what's going on in the book. Mm-hmm. But I totally agree that I liked... I guess it's harder for me than I thought to separate out my relationship with this story in all of its forms and this movie. Okay. Because I ended up really enjoying this movie for the most part until sort of the clumsiness of the last scene.
Okay.
But it might have just been because it wasn't completely awful. Yeah. Like, I do think it might have just been a case of such exceedingly diminished expectations that all of the things that the movie did well, I was like, oh, hey, yeah. I also, and it does, for me, the clown works
of the movie is really good.
Way better for me than it does for you.
That's it. Why? What works about that clown for you?
Well, for one, it's Tim Curry.
Right, but Tim Curry is often not a clown. Sure, I've seen him most of the movies he's in, Jason. He's terrifying, and he's not a clown. So, so it doesn't have to be a clown.
Two, clowns are scary.
I also don't understand that whole cultural reassessment of clowns as being frightening. I think clowns are fun and full of joy.
Okay, so that's where you're weird, because it's not a reassessment. It's how everyone has always felt.
That's not true. People didn't feel that way until probably this movie.
No.
Clowns have always been...
terrifying.
There's a reason that we have 150 years of clowns being clowns before the last 20 years of everyone being like, clowns murder people in the woods. That's never been true. Clowns juggle and trip over something and fall into a piano that explodes. If you can't enjoy that, then I don't understand who you are.
I like clowns in a reasonable clown context, but you can't tell me that clowns aren't inherently terrifying looking in any other context.
Sure, but so is anyone in any 1920s show makeup.
No, not like a clown. You're wrong on this one, Jim. So I think that is probably the core divide, is that to me and almost every single other human being, clowns are inherently terrifying on some level.
I don't even understand that at all. So you think that's why it makes sense that he stays a clown?
Yeah. Because
he's like, this is the scariest thing a giant monster that lives underground can think of.
For a kid, yeah. Because obviously he wants...
But they're not kids the whole movie.
Right, but he's attacking their childhood, like their child selves that are still in them.
Okay.
Like, he's like, I'm your childhood fears. Because normally he doesn't mess with adults, right? Like, he messes with them if he needs something functional, but he's not interested in eating adults. He's interested in eating kids.
There's no indication of that.
He says it specifically.
Does he? Okay.
Well, and also... the whole thing...
there's also 700 kids in that town that he doesn't mess with. For some reason, he's interested in messing with these 6 people.
No, he messes with lots of different kids.
He kills 2 kids that aren't the main characters.
More than that.
I only saw him kill 2 kids. Well, and the bullies, but the bullies come after him.
Sure, but he
goes after...
And they talk about how there's a whole series of child murders.
Okay, all right.
And that it's been going on for hundreds of years, as you said. And so he talks about how they taste better when they're scared. And he obviously is after kids because there's lots and lots of adults in the world that he just doesn't... he uses to get to the children. So obviously there's something about children that he's interested. It might be, well, no. They even say explicitly it's the believing thing. It's like is that cat attacking you again?
No, she's just snoring, and I didn't know if it was loud.
Okay. So it's the.
I'm gonna wake her up. She's really loud. Sorry. She's awake. She's mad at me, but she's awake.
No, so it's that believing thing, right? The believing makes it true. It's the double-edged sword. It's because it's the kids' belief in terrifying monsters under the bed, etc., that makes them more vulnerable to his psychic terror attacks, and also more delicious to him because they taste better when they're scared.
Okay.
Because he's running the whole town, right? Like, if all he wanted to do was eat people, he could just eat everybody, boom, instantly, like that. So obviously there's something about luring children in one by one in a terrifying way that is important to his ingestion of his meal, even if it's just for flavor.
Sure.
And also, the reason he starts going after those kids, I mean, presumably he's like kind of creeping around all kinds of kids, but these are the kids that react and start pushing back, and it's made pretty clear multiple times that he is afraid of them because he understands on a level that they don't until the end, that if they were to actually work together and sort of join forces of, in terms of supporting each other with their imaginations, they could defeat him. Like, he is afraid of their unity and afraid of them coming together, and so he's keeping them like off balance and off kilter.
Okay.
That's how I read that.
This all feels like you're just reacting to the first half of the movie.
Sure.
Because in the second half, I feel like most of that is not true anymore.
Well, it sort of is. Like, he still needs, like, he still can't confront them directly, right? He has to try to, like, psychologically separate them or get them not to be a unified front. I didn't get that, but that might just be me being dumb. Well, I don't know. It's also just like it's a real tonal thing, and it might be just a thing I decided was true. I mean, because I don't think it's spelled out explicitly. It feels like it kind of makes sense. Yeah. That he hates friendship. That also feels very Stephen King. Yeah. Yeah, because very much. This is in the branch of Stephen King, right? We've already had that first branch that we fully explored of man destroys his family. This is in the second branch of childhood is difficult and everyone is super mean to you, and wouldn't it be nice to have had friends when I was a kid? Yeah. This is that section of his Stephen career. King's Band of Brothers. Because in the second half, he's clearly afraid of the fact that they've come back, right? Like, everything he's doing is to try to keep them from coming after him. But all he can do is try to scare them. Right. For some reason, he can't attack them directly. He has to scare them, or he has to re-recruit Henry Bowers. Yeah. But sometimes he can attack them directly. Like when he rips that kid's arm off. Wait, what do you mean? I mean, at that point, he, as a clown, just grabs a kid's arm and pulls, and it comes off. Right, but that's somebody who's alone who is coming to him. So, like, he can attack you if you're alone. He can attack you if you're alone and afraid. And in his, like, if you're subterranean in some way, it seems that's the other thing. You have to be in a basement, or you're reaching into a sewer pipe, or... It threw me a little bit because that first kid, he does not try to scare at all until he is actively pulling his arm off. Right. He just tries to charm him. And so that is different enough from the generalized MO that it's like when your first murder is different than your calling card, no one's going to assume it's you, right? It threw me off of his path a little bit there. Well, but again, the generalized MO that we're talking about is his MO with the kids that he sees as a threat. But because he tries to charm the little girl. Right. He tries to charm Ben by being his father at first. Oh, yeah, okay. Like, he goes through he tries a number of different things where he's definitely trying to entice people. Now, I agree, it falls apart a little bit, especially when he like comes out of the drain in the shower thing. Like that could have been completely handled different. Like it doesn't hold together. I completely agree with that. But I do feel like there's a through line of what it feels like it's at least supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think you found that with more clarity than I was able to.
That's possible. And again, I was a little primed, although I haven't read the whole book.
Do you mean you were drinking whiskey?
Yeah. I haven't read the whole book, and I haven't read any of it since I was like 10.
Sure.
So, you
know. Can I tell you the 3 worst things in this movie? One of them is the word deadlights. I couldn't hate that any more than I do.
Well, that's pure king.
Yeah. The second one is him saying that everyone floats down there. Because what does that even mean? At first, you think he's referencing a balloon with that first kid, but then he just keeps saying it to everybody, and then they get down there, and it doesn't make any sense. Unless he means, I'm a giant spider, and I'll stick you to the wall. I don't know what. It's complete nonsense, and it makes me mad. And then the third thing is that the first time he shows up to Seth Green, he says, beep, beep, Richie. And then for the rest of the movie, everyone says, beep, beep, Richie to Harry Anderson. And you're like, why are they all torturing him like this? They say it like it's an endearment thing, but it's just a thing that he gets terrified by a werewolf. All of those are things that maybe make sense in the book, but were infuriating for me in this film.
Yeah, I have no idea if they make sense in the book. I don't really remember well enough.
I'm not asking you to clarify. I'm just telling you what I'm mad about.
I'm just
doing the old "What's Your Beef" section from Jay Leno. Is what I'm doing.
So it's. I think were I to watch this film again, I think the fact that I was even about to say that and then realized I'm not going to watch this film again.
Sure.
Does mean that I think I was a combination of just being pummeled into low expectations.
Sure.
And having some understanding and affection for what was going on. Because, I don't know, I felt like there were a lot of scenes that were well done that I enjoyed.
I agree. I fully agree.
Yeah.
When that kid goes to the pharmacist and it's Stephen King and then that dead guy talks to him. I don't remember if that's all one scene or not, but that was delightful.
I think that's all one. Yeah.
I think that if somebody went through and cut this down to 2 hours and also changed how it ends, it would be great. Or if you cut it down to just the kids. Although I do think the adults have... I think that they themselves are such strong actors. I honestly don't remember there being any great scenes with the adults, though.
I don't understand why you get rid of... I guess we talked about why you might get rid of it. But the intercutting is so crucial. So the other thing they got rid of... I'll just go back now to talking about the differences. The other thing they got rid of is the way that they actually deal with the monster. Like they don't just
push him with their hands?
No. The silver thing is like a little part of it.
Oh, when they're kids.
Yeah, when they're kids and when they're adults. But in both when they're kids and when they're adults, what's his name?
Tim Curry, John Ritter, Harry Anderson.
The main kid who's the Stephen King stand-in.
Oh, mole guy.
Yeah, the John Boy. Yeah. Both times he enters a battle of wills with the thing.
Okay.
So it's like completely on a mental plane.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's not in the movie at all.
It's a thing called the Ritual of Chud.
Like cannibalistic humanoid underground dwelling?
Yeah, although there's an umlaut over the U, so I guess it's
Chud.
Ritual of Chud. But that is what it's called.
So dumb.
Yeah. But it's like charmingly dumb.
Yeah.
I feel like
it's beautifully dumb. I love it.
Yeah. So like there's all of this intricate like fantasy novel stuff that goes on that you can see why they would have to end up cutting it, but it does really lessen the enormity of what's happening and the levels of what's happening emotionally and psychically. So like instead of just hitting it with a rock and pushing it over and tearing its heart out, they have to defeat it on another plane of existence before they can even access any kind of physical body to destroy.
That is better.
Yeah.
I was a little bummed, honestly, that it had any physical body at all.
Well, they do say there's a throwaway line of dialogue that was sort of an acknowledgement of the situation of like when it feeds, it has to have a physical body.
Okay.
So the idea being like maybe you're not actually vanquishing or killing this thing in and of itself, but you're killing its like physical access to this world or something like that.
Like it's like a 3-dimensional chunk of a 4-dimensional being. And
exactly.
It'll grow another beak, a 4-dimensional beak.
But like maybe it can't grow one in this 3-dimensional area anymore. It has to go to a different world or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember if they like legit kill Pennywise or not in the book, or if they just like vanquish him. I know Pennywise gets referenced in other books because he's like this, he's the devil essentially.
Wait, really?
Not actually, but like in the Stephen King cosmology, he's one of the more powerful evil things that exist. So the other thing that happens is that but also in the book, he's not always a clown. Okay. That was a choice that they made because I think they wanted to have visual and performer consistency throughout the scenes. So I kind of understand that, and because Tim Curry is Tim Curry and clowns are terrifying, Jim,
Disagree.
It works better for me. But in the book, so actually one of the fun things about the book that they definitely
scarier than a clown is a coal miner. You're like, that man is underpaid and he's going to die young.
That could be true of a clown too. So one of the things that happens in the book that they definitely couldn't do on television because there's no way that ABC would pay for these rights and they wouldn't have them to begin with.
Is to that the Ramones?
Well, they listen
to "Boom Shake the Room" by Will Smith.
They allude to it when it becomes "I Was a Teenage Werewolf," which I guess is a movie that they could access the rights to. In the book, he like in multiple different scenes takes the form of like Universal monsters. So like one kid gets killed by the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon. One kid gets attacked by the Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
So like there's all of these things, and it's all stuff that the kids would be seeing and be afraid of.
Sure.
And so
which I bet they changed that part. Oh no, it's set in 1960s, right? In my brain, I was like, they probably changed it because in the 90s they were probably like, nobody knows who these monsters are.
Yeah. Well, so they allude to it the one time when the hand comes out at Ben after he was pretending to be his dad. The hand comes out and it's the Gill Man's hand, and it's the same shot from Creature from the Black Lagoon.
That's funny.
But then they have to immediately have it be a skeleton that pops up, so so they don't get sued.
Right.
So there's like a lot of weird, I feel like, industrial reasons behind a lot of the choices that they made that I could sort of see while I was watching it, which also made it more interesting for me watching it because I was thinking about those things while I was watching it, and it also made me go a little bit lighter on choices they made because I could imagine like Lawrence Cohen and Tommy Lee Wallace being like, well, we just want to make a movie, and here are all the things that we have to work around, so let's do this time.
Yeah.
At least we'll have a stop-motion spider crab.
It's too bad this happened before we only had 3 entertainment companies.
Yeah.
Because Walt Disney
everybody would have just
probably owns Universal and ABC. I think they do actually own Universal and ABC.
No, NBC Universal is owned by Comcast, which is owned by GE.
Okay. Never mind then. GE and Disney would have had to have struck a
So
deal.
it would be Comcast versus Disney. But yeah, I don't know, man. The movie worked better for me than it should have.
I agree.
But I think there are some legitimate reasons that we've established, like clowns, and some illegitimate reasons, like my pre-existing sort of weird fascination with this story that I never fully read, so I never finished it in my head.
Sure.
So it just has all of these, like, there still has all of these branches off into other things that maybe could be true about the story, but I don't know because I'm not going to read it. Yeah. So it's just an unfinished, interesting space of imagination for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One thing that I think you'll like is that in the books, the children are aided by a magic turtle.
Oh,
which
why isn't that in the movie?
I bet it's not in the new one either.
That would have won me over 1,000%.
Yeah. So the magic turtle is like the most, I don't know if it's the most powerful being, or if
is it
it's
also
just
a Stephen King stock character? Does it come back in other books?
Oh yeah, it's the being that I think literally supports the entire macroverse on its back.
Sure. Okay.
So the turtle just shows up to like dispense wisdom and commune with forces of good within the different universes.
All right, I forgive Stephen King for the deadlights because of this turtle.
That's not the worst term, deadlights. I think it's I think it's terrible the way they all. I was disappointed when they said it because I was like, oh, that's not how you say that word.
No, and they all scoop it up. It's also, if it were in the film Christine, I'd be like, hooray. Mm-hmm. But instead, it's just a clown. Clowns don't have headlights. It doesn't even make sense. It's also a creature who's existed since before vehicles or electric lighting.
This is where the wiring in our heads are a little bit different because it didn't even occur to me to link it to headlights.
Really?
Yeah.
It's clearly a pun on headlights, Jason.
I don't actually think it's intended to be.
How could it not be? It is one letter different.
I know. No, I mean, you're not wrong. This is a situation where your brain is seeing more clearly than I think mine and Stephen King's.
If I didn't think it was connected to headlights, I would not hate it nearly as much. I would still think it's a dumb term. Deadlights.
I 100% don't think it's meant to be related to headlights, but I do think it's the kind of
beams
thing...
of light that shine out of his eyeballs or whatever.
No. It's bunches and bunches of beams of light that shine out of his tummy and mouth.
I don't care.
But also, I think that's another thing in the book where it's like you see them once you like see past the veil of reality, and then it's like you just see like this thing that you can only interpret as lights, and they're called the deadlights.
Yeah,
and I think it's because you're seeing like what's beyond life.
You can't hear this on the podcast, death. But I'm frowning as hard as I can possibly frown right now.
I don't know. It's all a mess. It's all whatever it is.
It's fine. The point is I forgive him because of that turtle. The turtle sounds
The turtle
like
is so charming.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't think either adaptation had the guts to include what I told you about in a previous episode, which is the orgy among the kids.
Right. It is definitely not in this one.
Nope. In fact, one of the kids goes so far as to say that he's never had sex, to which I thought, maybe you don't remember, but all of you have had sex with Beverly.
I think that's them specifically denying any connection with that part of the book.
Yeah. It's
They're like, not only did you not see it, but it definitely 100% didn't happen. Don't go read the book.
Yeah. I don't think they did it in the new one either. I mean, today's climate would not be the climate where you could, if you ever could.
That's a tough scene. That's a tough scene to include.
I think it's a scene that really can only, if it can successfully exist, and I'm not even positing that it does, but if it can successfully exist, it can only exist in prose, where you can do like multiple layers of meaning and experience within the sentences, and you don't have the image right there being the thing that it is. So like you can be in all of their heads at once and sort of be explaining how this is
why it's cool for all of them.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's your only way out, because otherwise there's just way too much to deal with.
Yeah. Jason, can I tell you, there was one, I redact my statement that nothing good happens in the second half. There's that one completely insane sequence where the main guy and the librarian find the main guy's bike from when he was a kid and fix it and ride it around together in a parking lot like total dopes. Yeah. That scene is delightful.
Yeah. I liked that
completely nonsense. Doesn't matter to the movie. Super delightful.
Well, it does matter because the bike is what works at the end to bring his wife back.
I don't remember that.
Oh, this is the last scene in the movie.
Oh, really?
Is John Boy gets on the bike and puts his wife on it. Because the whole idea... So again, it's one of those things where...
I just didn't care about that part or like it. I only like it when it's him and the librarian.
I liked that they kept the bike.
Yeah.
Even though most of the bike's use was really perfunctory. Yes. Because, again, you don't have the prose that puts you inside the experience in a different way. You're just looking at people on a bike. So it's only fun when it's those guys in the parking lot.
Agreed.
And I don't think Lawrence Cohen or Tommy Lee Wallace are up to the task of crafting a scene that can imbue any of the other stuff with any of the qualities that would be found in the prose. Yeah, I can imagine there being filmmakers who could do it, but that's not what we're dealing with here.
No.
But yeah, like the bike becomes a really potent symbol in the novel because it's the bike that beat the devil, and like he pedaled so, and he like, again, John Boy, it's all in these like little lines of dialogue. You can hear Lawrence Cohen sitting there being like, I loved this part of the book, but I can't get it in. I'll just have Richard Thomas say a line of dialogue that kind of alludes to all the things I liked about the scene that I can't do. There's a number of times in the movie that's where it's just one of the characters saying like 1.5 to 2 lines of dialogue more than is necessary for the scene, and it's all just cramming in sort of subtextual information or extra plot information that's from stuff that he couldn't fit in the script.
That's amazing.
And that happens at the end there, where I think he puts her on the bike and he goes, this bike beat the devil once, we pedaled so fast, I don't know if I can pedal that fast again. And then they go down the hill. Yeah. But like they can't even manage to shoot it so it looks like they're really going fast.
Yeah. They're just kind of rolling.
It just doesn't work at all.
Yeah. I forgot about that whole sequence because it was terrible, is why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it.
That's the movie.
And I still maintain that this is the epicenter of the entire King world.
Which, I mean,
and also
sort of
represents...
There's giant cosmic horror. There's a band of loser kids. There's way too much stuff to fit into a movie. It's all the things.
Yeah.
Except a psychic.
And it's also not... Well, no, but there's so much psychic...
There is a lot of psychic
event
activity
happening.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a tick in the box for you there.
Yeah.
It's also not a good movie.
Agreed.
Which is, once again, to me, at the epicenter of the King film phenomena.
Sure. I think the first half of this is very strong.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they get great performances out of those kids. Yeah. They set up some genuinely creepy scenes.
Yeah.
I do think maybe...
I think if the ending weren't so terrible, it would be super easy to cut it down into a hour and 45-minute long great movie.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, I mean, I also think you could still do that...
With the ridiculous ending?
No, I think you just leave out the adult ending.
Oh, but then you have to leave out all the adults.
You craft it somehow so that it's the kids defeating him. I bet you could manage... But then
why do they come back together, Jason?
I bet you could manage to edit it so that as they go into the sewer tunnel, they turn into their child selves and face him as children. And then when they leave the sewer tunnel, they're adults again.
I love that.
I bet you could manage to do that so that you only have one climax. It's the kid climax.
Yes, I love it. Except they go in twice as kids. You take the lamer parts of them being in the sewer as kids first.
Yeah,
and then the better parts. Oh, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna do that in November.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
What are you gonna do about the clown?
What do you mean? There's nothing you can do about it.
I didn't know if you had some plan to replace Tim Curry somehow.
No, I'm not going to replace Tim Curry. You know what I could do is pull Tim Curry out of other movies. I could put in a couple of clips from Clue and some from Legacy. You'd be like, oh, sometimes he's a clown, and sometimes he's a butler, and sometimes he's the actual devil.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
I think he's done a lot of voice acting for children's cartoons, too. I bet you could pull from that.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I could completely
sometimes he's a cartoon.
Tim Curry, yeah.
All right, well, this has been the epicenter of the earthquake in our brains that is this podcast.
Yeah.
I think we just recorded an episode that is proportionately as long as this movie.
Yeah. It's the 3-hour-long episode, and then it's an hour.
We're going to release it over 2 nights.
Can we? Does that mean we don't have to do anything tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, let's cut out. We can cut Misery and just release 2 parts of it. But I'm going to have to go... That's going to be a lot more editing for me because I'm going to have to go through and intercut it so that...
No, you just cut it exactly in the middle.
No. See, we're going to have to do like 5 minutes from the beginning, 5 minutes from the middle, 5 minutes from after that. We have to keep doing it so that the climaxes to the 2 halves line up.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm into that.
Yeah, cool. I'll do it.
Great.
See y'all in the funny papers. No more clowning around for this crew.
Get out of here.
Penny wise, pound foolish.
That doesn't even make sense.
Hell to the King is a special presentation of the Synesthesia podcast, produced by Iguana Donald Studios, and distributed by Split Tooth Media. Music by Loyalty Freak. Hell to the King is recorded live before a studio audience in a glass box suspended between the devil and the deep blue sea.
I'm gonna have inch-long candy bars stuck on all my teeth.
Synesthesia.